Hi everyone. I realize I'm the slot before lunch, so if I hear any tummies grumbling, I'll know what to do. The other day, a friend of mine asked me if I was religious. I said no, and I asked her the same question. She said, "No, but I'd like to be." When I asked why, she said she couldn't put a finger on it, but maybe being religious meant that your life was more meaningful, or that somehow you were part of something more wondrous. I think this is a misperception, and I'd like to give some examples of how a scientific, rational mindset can provide deep meaning and purpose and wonder to life. There are many great thinkers who have addressed this topic before, but I think there still seems to be a lingering feeling in society that a non-religious life somehow lacks something special and intangible, that atheists are missing something. William Lane Craig, the Christian apologist and philosopher, says that if God doesn't exist, then you are just a miscarriage of nature, thrust into a purposeless universe to live a purposeless life. That life is futile. Now, it is a cold reality that we're quite insignificant in the universe, and in a few billion years, we'll no longer exist. So it feels like the universe doesn't really care about us. But we should recognize that it doesn't owe us anything, and this shouldn't depress us or make us feel like our lives are somehow purposeless. The physicist Lawrence Krauss suggests that we should try and find a different type of consolation. He says, it should be spiritually uplifting that we are not created with a purpose by something that takes care of us like a mannequin with strings determining everything. We determine our own future, and that makes our future more precious. We should humbly rejoice in making the most of these gifts and celebrate our brief moment in the sun. If you're non-religious, you tend not to believe in an afterlife. Craig says that with no hope of immortality, man's life leads only to the grave. His life is but a spark in the infinite blackness, a spark that flickers and then dies forever. Pretty bleak, isn't it? Now, Richard Dawkins takes what I think is a more positive view of this fleeting mortality. He says that merely having the chance to experience this life is a wonder in itself, that we are the lucky ones. And I think this gives a powerful impetus to choose a meaningful purpose to life, something fun and useful to get on with while we wait for the sun to blow up. If we believe that this life is the only one we've got, we treat it as precious. We care less about what happens to us when we're dead and more about people living in the here and now. Now, as strange as it might sound, I quite like walking through cemeteries. I find them really peaceful, and I'm moved when I read the emotional tributes on the gravestones. However, instead of religious burials, I think it would be wonderful if more people decided to donate their bodies to science and medicine to try and save lives in the here and now. We could find new ways of communally cherishing our lost loved ones, perhaps adding a line underneath each tribute saying something like, "Donated her body to medicine, her heart saved a dying child." Another question that non-religious people often get asked is, where do you find your inspiration? Surely a rational outlook misses something transcendental and majestic about the world. That true wonder can't be fully experienced by a mere scientific view. If you want to see the wonder of the world through the eyes of one of its greatest scientists, I recommend the interviews with Richard Feynman called "It's Fun to Imagine" and "The Pleasure of Finding Things Out." In them, he argues that we all have the same access to the aesthetic beauty of the world, and taking a scientific view of that doesn't diminish from it. It only adds value. He's got this wonderful Bostonian accent, and he talks about appreciating the beauty of a flower, and then appreciating that beauty even more because you can understand its beauty at smaller dimensions. He also talks about the dynamic mess of jiggling atoms in a cup of coffee. We've all felt that magical feeling when watching a Richard Attenborough documentary. Or Carl Sagan's piece on the pale blue dot, where he notices that all of human existence is contained on a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. Or the idea that all the molecules and the chemicals inside of us were created in the collapsing of stars, so that literally we are made of stardust. The Japanese have a word for this. They call it yugen. And it's that profound sense of beauty in the universe. And I would suggest that there doesn't need to be any further appeal to a divine creator, that these moments can be enjoyed purely for what they are. Atheism 2.0, where he outlines his view for the future, and he says that the arguments for atheism have been won, and now it's time to move on. And in doing so, we should take the good bits from religion and use them to plug the holes in secular life. And he says that one can have spiritual moments without needing to believe in a spirit. And I'd like to offer a look at some communities who are experiencing those spiritual moments in a non-religious way. I'm lucky enough to be one of the organizers of Camp Quest UK, which is a summer camp for free-thinking kids. We run workshops in science and philosophy, and we do outdoor activities and games. We try to give kids the tools to think critically about the big questions in life, without pushing a particular worldview. Sometimes good ideas and confidence take a long time to form, so through facilitated discussions, we try to create the atmosphere so that kids can feel confident and comfortable in sharing their thoughts. The topics that we cover range from the usual big questions in life, like why are we here and how did the universe begin, to some more difficult and delicate topics like, is it ever right to end someone's life? Or what does it truly mean to be human, especially if you don't believe in a soul? Often the campers select the topics. So last year there was a boy who wanted to talk about death because he'd recently lost a grandparent. During the discussion, the young people spoke with deep compassion and clarity about losing their loved ones. One girl said that she'd never really felt like she had properly talked to anyone before coming to camp, where she felt she could talk and be listened to. Another boy said that thinking about the scale of the universe helped him overcome his fear of heights. But not all the experiences are about deep personal meaning and growth. Some of them are more about filling in the pictures. After that same talk on cosmology, there was another boy who came up to me and said that he felt the world was full of lots of levels. And then he paused. Like a big game of Zelda. There is another example of a non-religious community coming together to give people meaning and purpose, and it's one you might have heard of recently in the news. It's called the Sunday Assembly. It's hosted once a month in a church in London. This is an example of Atheism 2.0, and it's hosted by two comedians. And the idea is, it's a non-religious meeting, but the format is similar to a church service. So they have talks on science, they sing pop songs together, and they share moments of silence. They also have a team of volunteers who go out and volunteer in the community, and they get to call them their action heroes. In the online world, there is a fast-growing community, most of whom it seems are religious. Beg your pardon, non-religious. And get that one right. And their idea is they're dedicated to celebrating the best parts of science. They're called I Friggin' Love Science. Actually, the real name is slightly different, but I'm prevented by decency from saying exactly what it is. I went to the page recently, and I found out that NASA have offered the opportunity for young people to write poetry, and for that to be sent on the next mission to Mars. I think it's a great way of science giving the young people a chance to connect personally with the rest of the universe. And there are many other examples like these of non-religious people coming together to get the meaning and purpose that they seek in life through the natural world and through positive human interactions. So is there something that a non-religious life can say about our morals or our values. If we're non-religious, we have a freedom to apply new information and new insight to every moral dilemma. We have a license to question. So instead of relying on one particular moral creed from a long time ago, we can build on all of history and all of science's teachings from all human cultures. We can appreciate fully the last 3,000 years of progress in morality and celebrate our secular human achievements like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Now, many of you here will be familiar with Pascal's wager, which says that you should believe in a God because if you're right, the rewards are infinite. And if you're wrong, you haven't lost anything. There is an alternative to this, which I've heard called the atheist wager, which is that you should live a good life without religion. If there is a loving God, she will reward your good deeds. And if there isn't, you've left a positive legacy. So instead of living your life with a purpose to be rewarded in the afterlife, you can live your life with a purpose to be rewarded in this life through the effects of your good deeds. It's captured in the phrase, be good for goodness sake. And for many non-religious people, this is enough. Should we be worried if someone that we love decides not to be religious anymore? I would suggest the opposite. My own deconversion from Catholic to humanist was a profoundly liberating experience for me. I felt like my mind was free to choose my own purpose in life and then to live that on a daily basis. A lack of belief is not something to be feared, I think. It can be a really positive thing. There are plenty of sources of meaning and wonder and reasons to be good for non-religious people. I'll finish by sharing a story from camp. This is Katie. I mentioned to her that I was coming up to speak to you today, and I said, if she was able to join me, what would she like to talk about? Unfortunately, she couldn't join me. She had exams at this time, but I'll share her thoughts with you. Now, as part of camp, we offer the opportunity for the older campers to take on positions of responsibility and leadership. And earlier this year, she'd come to me and said she wanted to lead a workshop on the topic of psychoneuroimmunology. So I said, okay. And I thought perhaps she wanted to come today to talk to you about that. But actually, she surprised me. She said she thinks that adults misperceive education as their chance to open young people's minds, whereas in fact, often we're closing them. She'd noticed that the older you get, the more you harden your opinions and become more closed-minded, whereas, she says, young people are naturally open-minded to all possibilities. And this gives me my purpose in my life, to help young people reach these moments of realization. And for me, that's enough. As long as I occasionally get to stand on the top of mountains, breathe in that infinite space, and get that sense of yugen, I'll be a happy person. Thanks very much.